What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Salty Runback. Here to be your weekly intake of North American Developmental League of Legends. It is the episode number 6, and we're headed into the home stretch for the NACL regular season. Only 2 weeks remain before we head into those playoffs. Speaking of playoffs, we have the NACLQ Semifinals and Finals happening this weekend. Going to be a pretty good time. We're back into the swing of things. I am Grapes. That is Hawk. Hawk, how have you been doing today?
Grapes. Honestly, it's been a pretty terrible day, but my day just got better. You know why? Because we're recording Salty Runback, and that's one of my favorite times of the week.
At least that's happening, I guess.
Look, I'm running on like 4 hours of sleep, and like I've had, for one of my clubs on campus, just a lot of bureaucratic nightmares, but that's neither here nor there. So, you know.
Yeah, we're kind of in the dog days of this the spring semester here in college. We have those weeks here and there, but we're here recording the podcast. I'm repping Korea for the World Baseball Classic happening in a couple weeks. It's going to be a good time. We got a lot of North American League of Legends to talk about. And speaking of talking about North American League of Legends, we're going to be doing some more of that this weekend on the Salty Runback Twitch channel. The NACLQ the NACLQ quarterfinals were a really big success last week. We're going to be hosting the second unstreamed semifinal this Saturday on twitch.tv/saltyrunbackpod. And just a disclaimer for everybody who is planning on watching the NACLQs, the finals is going to be on twitch.tv/Challengers League. However, only the first 3 games will be streamed from there. For the rest of the series, you have to go to the Rally Cry Twitch channel. There might be a little bit of confusion. We will try to update you and remind as many people as possible throughout. We just want to get this disclaimer out in as many places as possible because the series will be cutting off, and there's some good teams in here, Hawk. We might be going for a little bit more than 3. It might be like a 4 or 5 game series. I don't know.
I gotta be honest, I would be pretty surprised if there's a sweep any direction. I know that is something we'll get to a little bit later, but I like how you asked the question if you're planning on watching the NACLQ finals, because no, you are planning on it. That's not a question.
You are.
You just are. If you're not, you now are. I have scheduled it for you. You're watching the finals.
Yeah, we got your meetings, all your other potential scheduling issues all out of the way. You're watching the finals, and it is going to be a good time. And then you are going to watch even more NACL after that, because that's what we have to do, and we're going to make you do it too. But without further ado, let's head into the first section of our show, which are the 5 headlines that spotlight the week of North American developmental as a whole. Starting off with a very important and interesting headline here, Hawk, that both impacted the NACL and also the LCS. It was announced on Saturday night that EMENES will be scrimming with the LCS team, and that Diplex will be moving on to the Challengers roster for Cloud9 for the foreseeable future. Now, this is, of course, a really interesting move. We knew that these 2 players were both very good coming out of Europe, and some people were maybe posturing that this could be an opportunity for EMENES to make his way into the LCS. But, Hawk, do we think that this is the right move for Cloud9?
I mean, look, I'm some people. I feel like it was either last episode or the episode before where I was saying I think there's a world in which EMENES promotes into C9 just proper. Now, I did not really think it would happen this week, but I mean, EMENES has looked amazing in Challengers League so far. He's clearly been a cut above the competition. And purely in terms of talent, I think that this is a perfectly sound move. Now, it is actually a little surprising to me that Cloud9, when they're 8-1, right? Or they're 7-2. 7-2. Is gonna make a roster swap like this, but clearly something about EMENES or something about Diplex either isn't working, something about EMENES seems appealing, and again, EMENES has been smurfing a grape, so I think it's perfectly fine to make this choice now, get him into the roster, and honestly, this might speak to me that Cloud9 was always planning on having EMENES be the starter as long as he worked out in Challengers League.
Yeah, maybe it was a bit of a trial run to make sure that everything was going all right. Of course, there's been some controversy with EMENES in the past, so at least making sure that he was ready and primed to be on this team. Maybe that was the decision that they were going to make overall. But here's what I will say about this situation. EMENES has almost certainly been at least a top 2, if not top 1, mid laner here in the Challengers League further out this season. You could maybe argue with Insanity, but then there's some interesting conversations to have at some points. But he had an incredible week 1. He's had some really great moments throughout the rest of the season, and I don't feel like there hasn't really been a game where he has looked bad and feel like he's lost Cloud9 a game. The one difference that I see with him and Diplex is that, of course, in the Challengers League games that we've seen EMENES play in, he goes for a lot of flips. He is the leader in solo kills for a reason. He will make things interesting and make things really, really proactive across the map, whether it's for the good or the bad of his team. And I think that is probably one of the things that Cloud9 might be looking for going into this second round robin of the LCS. And it might not even be for particularly LCS success, but maybe internationally. You know, there's all the memes about NA going into Worlds and then just doing nothing and losing, right? And I feel like Diplex was a very talented mid laner. I think it probably was an upgrade over Jensen, as we see Dignitas not doing so well, and has been pretty solid overall. But, you know, EMENES might bring that extra X factor in there somehow. If he is able to come into the international competitions and really, you know, push the envelope a little bit onto some of the opposing mid laners, maybe that's somewhere that Cloud9 can get some sort of advantage. And you can already see it in the way that Diplex is playing in Challengers, as he did, you know, on Sunday, where the games that he had a Silas game and a Jace game, he did really well. He probably carried similar level to EMENES, but felt a little bit quieter. You didn't hear the caster shouting out his name, doing any super flashy plays, but he's always just able to be there and perform. So that's my take on the situation. I feel like EMENES probably has a higher ceiling, lower floor, while Diplex is somewhere in between.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I mean, EMENES, I agree with everything you said. Definitely more of a mechanical player. To, I guess, play a little bit of devil's advocate, maybe curb expectations and not think like fakers coming into the league, right? EMENES factually leading the league in solo kills has I think 26 or something, which is pretty crazy. However, I think like half of those came in week 1. Right. And so while, yes, like that is insane how many solo kills he has, right? Like he's not been necessarily piss smurfing it every game either. There has been some quieter games. So again, this isn't to say like, oh, he's bad or he's falling off or anything like that. Like, no, very great player, but just curbing some expectations. And also, I think an important identity that Cloud9 has always had ever since Blabber came into the league and became the best North American jungler, was that, you know, having a mid laner that plays around him and is willing to play the Blabber style. And that is one thing I think Diplex did provide to the team. And as you said, Grapes, coming down to Challengers League, we're seeing it there too, being a little bit more willing to take that less hard carry style. And so it will be interesting to see how EMENES and Blabber work together and if it works at all. So something to keep our eyes on. Do I think EMENES is not going to be able to do that? No, I think he will probably be fine. But mechanics doesn't always equal in immediate success. However, EMENES most certainly does have those mechanics, and I expect him to be very good, Graves.
And I think it's a good time to maybe explore this possibility if you think that it might be a possibility at all. Because you're not griefing your end of season if EMENES somehow doesn't work out.
Yeah.
It's right in the middle
Second round
of,
robin,
the regular season. Yeah, so if he does well for the next few weeks, probably stick with him the rest of the way. If not, always have Diplex, who was a very safe, solid option right in the mid lane for Cloud9. So I definitely understand where C9 is coming from. And, you know, for the sake of our region, I hope that it goes well for them.
Yeah.
Right? Because seeing our teams do well internationally, always a good thing. But let's move on to our next topic of the day of this 6th episode of Salty Runback. It's about a team that maybe we weren't expecting to talk super highly of for the rest of the season. But FLYFAM made a couple of adjustments this week. They brought up Hyper, the jungler formerly of Supernova, also played on TSM Academy in 2021 and 22. And he looked pretty solid. I mean, FLYFAM had a really exciting series against Team Liquid Challengers, albeit they lost both games, but showed a lot more life than maybe we were expecting against a team that we consider to be pretty good in TLC. So, Hawk, it was only week 1 of Hyper on FLYFAM. Is this the jolt? Will FLYFAM be able to turn it around now that they have promoted this jungler in Hyper?
Graves, I hate that we phrased the question this way because no, I don't think Hyper is going to save FLYFAM. But I mean, I think Hyper is good. You know, was an okay piece on an okay academy team last year, and although he definitely wasn't, I would say like in the top half of junglers, it was, I think, a little bit disappointing to see him go back down to amateur and not be in the NACL this year. Coming onto a great Supernova roster though, looked great, and now I think pretty unsurprisingly is back. So while I think it definitely could be argued that this player has a lot of room to grow, it's great to see Hyper back, and I do think Hyper is really good, and I do think he could elevate FLYFAM. You know, they looked okay against Team Liquid Challengers, right? But no, I don't think he's going to save FLYFAM, though. That is my one hesitation.
The word save is a hard phrase to kind of juggle with.
A little tricky.
They've only won 1 game, and we have 2 weeks left out of the 7 in the regular season. But I do think Hyper brought will bring some good experience and a player that has played both in academy and also, I don't know if you remember this, but he was part of lock-in the start of 2022. So he has some
True. Oh, I
LCS
forgot about
games
that.
under his belt. Now,
He also didn't Hyper play when they subbed in like Instinct and Sword as well.
I don't think so, because you wouldn't have played Spica. You wouldn't have played him over Spica, I don't think, at any point. So
You might be right.
it
I'm gonna look that. I'm gonna.
It might have been
double-check,
some weird like visa issues with them. That was the most of the reason why Hyper was playing on TSM main throughout 2022. It was only a couple of games, but overall, Hyper had some really interesting early games for FlyFam in their series against TLC. He was all over the map and really helped the team get off to some really nice early game advantages at some points. Like Blaze had some good scores. Lunacia had some good games in the early game as they have in the past. But if you think back at it, it's very similar to the way that they've been playing in the past, and that's not the problem that we have with FlyFam. The early game is not the issue. We've seen Lunacia get solo kills. We've seen Instinct and Sword win 2v2. We've seen Blaze perform really well in the early to mid game. But man, this FlyFam team just does not know how to team fight. And we saw it once again against TLC. They had Bradley on Olaf, and they just could not stop this man in a 5v5. He just would run straight to the back line and kind of just destroy everybody on that team once they got a little bit later on into that game. I think short term, maybe Hyper's a better player overall than Maniac and can maybe facilitate even bigger early game advantages, and maybe FlyFam can win 1 or 2 more games just by snowballing even harder than before and like just winning in 25 minutes without having to team fight a single time. But long term, these problems still stand, and we're going to have to continue to talk in a very similar way about this team, in that they just need like some coaching assistance and knowing how to play 5v5, because we've seen highlights from all these teams, from all these players on this team, but they've all been in lane. None of them have been like later on into the matches that they've been playing.
I definitely by the way, Hyper did not play in LCS last summer, so you were right. But I definitely think Hyper will bring a lot to this team. And I again, as you so highlighted, FlyFam, they just got a lot of issues. However, there are pieces, there are flashes of brilliance, and they have developmental potential. And so I'm glad to see Hyper playing on this team, but I don't think it's going to all of a sudden be a huge turnaround for this roster.
Yeah, well, again, we'll see. It all comes down to playoffs at the end of the day. If they can get a couple of series wins, that will change the entire outlook on the season as a whole. Yeah. And, of course, hoping for all the players' success and best of luck to them moving forward. But let's move on to our next topic here, which is about some of our initial expectations from some of these teams. Hawk, we had a lot of different opinions going into the season, and I feel like we're around that halfway point in the NACL where we're almost done with the regular season, about to hit into playoffs. We're about halfway through the split in spring for NACL, and we're at this is a nice point to maybe sit back and think about what we thought about in the past. And maybe I'll ask you this first: who's a player that has exceeded your initial expectations? Somebody you thought they're not going to be that good, and has really, really impressed so far.
Yeah, and just to clarify this for everyone too, we've done this question before, or at least something really similar, but the reason why we wanted to do it again is because we wanted to take this opportunity to talk about more players that might have flown under the radar so far, maybe that we as a duo haven't really talked about as much. So, I could sit here and talk about Young for the 10th episode in a row, which, I could totally do that. Like, that's not the point of this, right? And so the player that I want to shout out that I feel like we haven't really talked about too much, especially even when talking about his team, is Hoon on Dignitas Challengers. I remember coming into the year grapes, and we were talking like Hoon could maybe be the worst top laner in the NACL, and that has not been the case. And not only that, but Hoon has not been relegated to say like Gnar duty or Ornn duty the whole year. He's had some games on Fiora, Champions of the Like, and I think it's fair to say he hasn't been the standout carry on this team. It's hard to be when you've got Tomo and Diamond just smurfing on everybody and Insanity playing Udi or mid, right? Like, Hoon has been great, and it's really awesome to see this player doing so well, and whether or not it's sort of the product of this roster just clicking better. Maybe Hoon is adjusting well, or maybe he's just fucking cracked now. Who knows, right? But that's just that's so exciting to see for a player that I think it's fair to say was not that good last year, and now Hoon is in the conversation of some of the great top laners in NACL.
Yeah, Hoon had some really good performances over these past couple of weeks. He had a Scion game against 100 Thieves that Dignitas ended up winning, where got targeted really, really heavily the whole game, but never died. And
Scion
then just
gaming!
did Scion things at the end of the game. And that's something that we did not see out of Hoon last year in the summer split. So that's really, really good adjustments to see. And I think that he is actually a really key part in Dignitas having success, because he was one of the players we were like, okay, we think that this team is good, but maybe some of these pieces might not be. And I think that Hoon is maybe proving us wrong, and that's why they're sitting tied for first in the standings.
I think to put it bluntly, we were expecting a liability, and instead we've gotten a star. Like, that is a fantastic turnaround for this player, and it's a great to see from Hoon.
Yeah, but speaking about Dignitas, they did go 2-2 this week, and one of their losses was against Wildcard. And we talked a little bit about Wildcard throughout this show, but somebody we haven't talked about too much is Lens, their AD carry. And he had a absolutely fantastic week this week. I think he's looked really good these past couple of weeks as well. And he was somebody, if you remember from our initial power rankings that we did, that I thought was going to be a big downgrade over Wixie from that original AoE Ginger Turmeric roster. And that's why I had Wildcard rated pretty low. But man, Lens is so good at team fighting, and also in lane as well. Him and Duo King have been performing pretty well in that regard, but like that series against FlyQuest Challengers, where he was on Jinx, and the entire FlyQuest team would try to dive him on multiple occasions, over and over and over again. And shout out to his team who helped him out a lot as well. But Jinx Jinx on Lens just never died, and he just pumped out so much damage, and has been a really actually big part of how Wildcard win games, which is around bot prio and having Keel take dragons, and Lens just succeeding on multiple fronts throughout this season has been a crucial part of Wildcard's success.
It really has. I mean, like, Lens coming into his stint on 100 Thieves Next last summer was pretty new, pretty raw. Hadn't played too much, had been on a couple rosters here and there. I think I'd played with some of these players on an older version of Ginger Turmeric back before, but by and large, like, was not a very established player in the scene, and looked good. Like, we were like, oh, this guy could be great. But coming in, like you said, Grapes, there was some of those concerns, those question marks, I think, more than anything. And I mean, Lens has really answered them. And not only has he looked amazing, he has, I think, ramped up over the course of the split. And that is what you want to see from your developmental piece. I mean, like you said, Lens in recent weeks has been giga hard carrying some games. You're able to go 1-1 against Dignitas Challengers, which means that you were able to not get blown out in lane by Tomo and Diamond, who have blown out a lot of great bot lanes in lane, mind you. It means that you were able to hard carry some games. Again, the week before, there was the Draven game where he had like it was they were losing. Wildcard was down like 3,000 gold, and then he gets like 10 kills on Draven, and it's over. I mean, there have been games that have been won by Lens, and not a lot that have been lost by this player. And so, not only to see him playing well, but to see him growing is really exciting, and I totally agree. So, I mean, Hoon and Lens, man, like, we've not said their names a lot, but they are players that anyone should have their eyes on.
Yeah, and they're on top 3 teams, I think, at the moment for a reason. And before we move on, some other shout-outs I wanted to have really quickly were Kevy for CLG Challengers and Lunacia. They were kind of my backups in case you took Lens from me, because I know I always ask you the question first. But I got to talk about Lens, so it all is good at the end of the day. But shout out to those players as well. Let's move on to the NACLQ, which is where we'll be spending the rest of this part 1. Our first topic in that regard, as we move on to topic number 4, is Native Gaming, the team that a lot of people had super high expectations about. They lost in the quarterfinals on Saturday in what I think was one of the best series that we have seen in the NACLQ all year against Team Fish Taco. But they're out of the tournament in the quarterfinals, and they are stuck at, I believe, 60 qualification points, while the other people that are still in at around that 80 to 100 mark going to end up there by the end of this split. And there's only one tournament left, which means it will be hard to get back into that top 4. Going to need a really good performance in that next tournament. Hawk, do we think that Native Gaming are still favorites to make it into that top 4 despite their quarterfinal loss?
I mean, this is such a hard question to answer. So just for some context, like you said, they got out in quarters. And basically, to make promotion relegation at this point, Native Gaming has to at least, I think definitely at least has to make semis in the next tournament, if not final. Like, if they make semis, it's not guaranteed that they make promotion relegation. And then if they make finals, I think it's probably guaranteed. I've not run the numbers on that, but that I think is how it kind of works out in my head. So, I mean, which the bottom line is like, A, you have to show up at the next tournament, and B, you can't just show up, but you also might have to get a little lucky. You know, you've really got to improve that you are that top 1, top 2 team. And I mean, the series against Team Fish Taco, it was a great series. Great, it made you use the B word, the bad caster word, banger.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was so entertaining to watch. That was a blast to cast with you. And Native, ultimately, they were the ones that fell. And I mean, if it was Team Fish Taco, we'd be asking the same question as well, because this was so obviously a team built to contend for not just NACLQ, not just making promotion relegation, but promoting into the tournament, right? Like, we've talked about Fan. Like, why is he here, man? And if you're not able to promote, that starts to raise some question marks, right? So, I think they're definitely still in the mix. I would not count Native Gaming out at all. But to say that they're a favorite at this point, honestly, I don't think so. I just think the math doesn't favor them. I think they would need, they need to show up and win the next tournament, or place really high.
And I think that's what it comes down to, kind of just the aspect of, the format, and there's only two qualifiers to get into the promotion relegation tournament. Do I think Native is a top 4 team out of the qualifier options? Yeah, probably. I think their series against TFT was amazing. I wish it went 5 games and that was just like the finals, because like the fact
that game 3 was one they needed to forget if they had an extra game after that one,
The fact that the game 3 ended because Fan picked a Mumu and decided to invade to try and like cheese their way into victory, and kind of just failed, and then the game just like was kind of doomed after that.
It was rough. Good idea,
just,
bad
execution. If that was game 3 of a best of 5, like think of how many of the other stories we could be telling for what happened in those next 2 games. But I digress. Native did not play best of 5. They played a best of 3 and they lost. And I think that, of course, this team is still super talented. Messages and Scooped look amazing in every single fight that they play out. Even the ones that they were losing.
I'm so happy. I was talking about Messages at the beginning of the split. This guy's look crazy. He's look so good.
They've been amazing. I still have a ton of faith in Fnatic and Rhino as well. Shocky, honestly, has been okay. He's
been fine.
Couldn't really break Alorum in that series, which kind of is the litmus test of if you're a great top laner here in this league.
Yeah.
But to be honest, not a lot of people have. There's a reason TFT is in the semifinals. So Shocky probably has a couple of other things that he needs to work on to really elevate this team to the next level. But when you look at it again, Hawk, I mean, this team is so good, right? But Supernova, Douyin Tony top, TFT, Maryville, like which one of those teams do you see not making it instead of Native? Like maybe Supernova because they had Hyper like stolen away from them. Maybe Maryville but they lost to Native. Like it's really hard to tell. I don't know if there's necessarily an easy out in this case.
Yeah, there really isn't, because again, you look at the teams to not make it, and it's like, I mean, like you said, maybe Supernova, maybe Tony Top, but they still look great. And then also, I mean, you've got to consider the teams that didn't make semis that could contend with Native. And I think, Native is probably better than all of them. Like, I think it would be disingenuous to say that, like, say maybe UST or Team Ambition couldn't at least push them, right? And maybe on a good day take a series and like, again, not expected, but you just never know what's going to happen. And it's like I said, even though I think Native is more than capable of making promotion relegation, they're more than capable of just winning the next tournament, right? The math doesn't favor them, and they are certainly going to have to level up, because there were aspects of their game that were amazing, but there were aspects of their game that got exploited. Whether or not you can chalk it up to Fan flipping a level 3 invade, there were other mistakes made in that series. And so, I think we can't call them a favorite, Grapes. For as good as they may be, they've got to come in OQ2 and really show up.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that even like the open qualifier portion is going to be very important in this next
That's also
event.
true. 5 points per win.
Yeah, the fact that only 4 teams make it just means it's so much closer between these top teams. Like each win in this open qualifier is going to be really important. The fact that Maryville went 5-0 over Native now like is a really, really big deal.
And Tony Top going 3-2 as well, just to add that little wrinkle.
So that is definitely things we have to consider. Of course, I still feel confident in Native. I just don't know if we can consider them runaway going to be the first seed in the tournament anymore. So,
not favorites, but definitely possible, and should be something we look out for.
Yep, and we'll keep rooting for them and the rest of the teams in the NACLQ. Moving on to our final topic of the part one of this episode, which is kind of shining some light on some of the teams that didn't make it to this next weekend of the NACLQ. There's a lot of teams that looked pretty good, got eliminated, and will be back for the second qualifier. So, Hawk, the question I pose to you, which team are you most interested in to see return to qualifier 2, somebody that can make a jump and maybe jump into that contention mark that we were talking about with Native?
Yeah, so I know we've talked a lot about this team, but I am so excited, Grapes, to see Lit return, and I really hope that they do. This team, you know what? I wasn't riding on Lit for a while. I mean, I was pretty low on them compared to the committee. There were things that I wasn't super excited about for them. But you know what? Lit Esports, they showed up, and they played really well. And not only that, we talked about it. They were a team that learned from mistakes and was able to adapt to adversity. And, okay, they got 2-0'd by Maryville. It was pretty one-sided. That happens to a lot of teams that are worse than Maryville. Like, Maryville makes teams that are slightly worse than them look a lot worse than them. That's just the way Maryville plays, right? But Lit had so many great things going for them, and especially a lot of these players I think are so exciting, particularly Livacious and Munchie. I think they were absolute standouts on the top side of the map, Grapes. Munchie, we were sort of expecting. Livacious, maybe not as much. Looked excellent in the top lane. And so I would love to see this core of players return and make another strong run. I would be surprised, honestly, if they didn't make another quarterfinal. And depending on quarterfinals matchup, shit, they might make top 4. I don't know. Like, this is a team that is, they've got some exciting pieces. And it was really a delight to watch them play.
Yeah, something had happened as well between this episode and the last one that we talked about, Lit, is that they beat Horizon Gaming in a 3-game series as well.
Yeah,
so
that was not expected.
I mean, not something that we were expecting. Yeah, so that already is them taking that next step. They had some moments against Maryville where it looked like, hey, this is actually a team that is pretty solid and can contend.
And they had good ideas,
realm.
Some good ideas. Some things didn't go well.
But Maryville did Maryville things at the end of the day. But I'm very excited about Lit. The team that I want to talk about that got eliminated a little bit earlier was Zenigma, actually. They were a team that beat Mirage. They were seeded around 20th in the open qualifier and made it all the way up to that top 12. And they had pieces that I didn't know a lot about going into this tournament, and now I know a lot about going out of this tournament. Of course, Cocoa Puffs and Dunks were the two notable names on this roster, but I think their bot lane and Enthralled and Cerulean were amazing. They both were playing. They're both spamming Champs Key right now, which has been going on throughout the past couple of days, and they have looked really good in that. Danny has also had some solid games. This team beat Mirage, who is a team that maybe people were considering to enter that top 8 or so if things went right for them, and also a team that is very, very young. So I think that, and probably is able to learn throughout the games. They beat TFT in one game last Saturday to try and get their way into the quarterfinals, and now they look like they are a team that can make another jump. I'm sure the committee is going to be ranking them a little bit higher than 20 this time around.
I mean, I sure as hell will be. I agree. I think Zenigma is that other team that I'm really looking at to potentially make a jump. And again, to get a little bit into play style and stuff, both Lit and Zenigma that we both mentioned, Grapes, we talked about their top laners and their junglers first. And honestly, it's not a great time to be a top laner or a jungler right now in the meta. So, I mean, who knows what the meta will look like in the next open qualifier. Probably won't be that different, but maybe a little bit different. And you never know if a carry jungler comes back into the meta, maybe that'll elevate these teams. I mean, it's just impossible to know, right? But it's just so exciting to see players that we may have individually rated a little bit higher or a little bit lower, or maybe we didn't hear as much about, and they come in and they really show their stuff. And even though it's an early exit that maybe both the teams would have wanted, it's a really admirable performance, and it's so interesting to watch those teams.
Yep. My last team I want to give a couple of hearts out to, and maybe I want to hear your reaction out of this as well, is Godel Gamers.
I knew that was going to happen.
They dropped their top laner, unfortunately, was unable to compete with them for the rest of this tournament. Will not be competing with them in last, although he did look very, very solid in the games that he did play. Took Maryville to a 2-1 in the game in a series where they had to FF game 1. So they went 1-1 against Maryville effectively. Decoy came in as the replacement top laner against UST, and that was a close series even with him in that position and not looking very good. So I think if Godel, that core, can stick together, because Smalls, ADC, man, insane. Really, really great performances there. If they could find a top laner, I don't know who that top laner is going to be because honestly, not a lot of top laners out there right now that are looking for opportunities. Godel is a team that I could watch out for as
Definitely.
somebody that could make it a little bit further next time.
I did just see actually on Twitter, it was either this morning or last night, PCL, he's LFT, man. I don't know. Pick up the pie cake lord for Godel gamers. That they would be cooking actually if they got PCL.
I don't know if PCL is the answer. They need somebody who can like hard win lane.
Okay,
because that's
right,
what last was, and PCL, great team fighter and stuff like that. But so is Decoy, and it didn't work out too well for them. But maybe we'll see what we'll see what happens. I am rooting for those teams to succeed because it just makes everything so much more competitive. That's gonna do it for our first part. We got a lot of headlines out of the way, but we're gonna head over to part 2 in just a little bit, where we will be headlining the 4 teams we didn't get to talk about for the NACLQ that will be playing in the semifinals on Saturday. Hello, we are here in part number 2 of episode 6 of Salty Runback, and you know, Hawk, I thought that this would have been a really great time to preview the finals of the NACLQ. Unfortunately, the way things work is that the semifinals happen on Saturday, the finals happen on Sunday. There's not really a lot of time to do a whole episode of Salty Runback in between those 2 days. Pretty busy over the weekend, so we thought, what would be a good idea but to predict all of the semifinals matchups and try to, go through all of the finals that could potentially happen and preview what those are going to look like, who we think is going to win all of them, and just overall find out what we think about these 4 teams. Let's break down what our plan is for this part 2. It's a little wonky.
Yeah, so, like you said, we can't do one finals preview, so why not just preview every possible finals combination, and that way we're never wrong, okay?
Yeah.
And then what we can do is after we know which teams are in the finals, we just post the one, right? And it's like, oh, we knew all along. Like, no.
Yeah, get you the high-depth analysis you need.
You'll get all 4 so we can talk about all these teams. And basically, we're going to go through, and for every matchup, we're going to give like the general storylines to look out for, key matchups in terms of players, lanes, general expectations for how the series will go. We'll each have a premonition, so that's just something random that we think will happen during the series. And then give a score prediction for the series, very basic. So that way you should get everything you need to know about the teams, the players, and the games themselves, so that way when the finals does come around, you are prepared and you are going to be an informed viewer.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty fun. We are only able to do this because since there are 4 teams left, that means that there are 4 possible finals outcomes between Maryville playing against TFT and Supernova playing against Douyin Tony top in the semifinals that happen on Saturday. So I don't know. I guess it's about good a time as ever to head over to our first potential finals matchup here, Hawk. Let's talk about Maryville University up against Douyin Tony top. The seeds that are considered to be higher according to the way Rally Cry has seeded the teams out. Let's say they both win. And what overall do we think about this matchup? I guess we can start with this first part. Your headline, the movie poster headline, so to speak. One sentence to describe the narrative entering this series.
Iconic and an academy player against his old team, baby. That's the narrative that we're going for. I mean, and the other narrative I'll maybe give too is side lane aggression grapes and lots of play through the jungle. Both these teams more than partial to play carry, and it feels like any position.
My headline, the battle of infrastructure, because Maryville, one of the highest levels of infrastructure out of every amateur team. They are the collegiate program. They all live together. They have a full structure of how things are going. Douyin Tony top is 5 people that said, hey, let's play some League of Legends together. And they are meeting up in the finals here today. Who will win? It's the good old-fashioned 100 Thieves Next versus Taco Gaming setup. And I think this is going to be something that will be fun to talk about. But
that is
speaking of things
way
that are
better than mine.
to talk about,
I love the 5 friends versus the collegiate titans.
Yeah, it's a good one. I took some time to prep some of this stuff out. Let's go to the next part. Key matchup here with this series. If these 2 teams do play against each other, what is one matchup that you are very, very excited to see going in?
Yeah, so, I mean, I already talked about Iconic against the old team and Grapes. I think the matchup to watch is going to be, I guess I'm going to cheat a little bit. It's going to be top jungle against top jungle. Maryville, we know how much they love to play through Auto Orange Niles. And Iconic Tony top, I mean, they're the 2 biggest names on this team. And they're the ones that I'm looking at to really be the ones that are able to secure the wins. It has been Grapes, Iconic. being the one to secure a lot of Tony Top's wins. So can he prove that he is the one for Maryville and not Odd Orange? I mean, that is really where my eyes go.
I love how it's, Maryville is going to be playing against, if they make the finals, they'll be playing against a player of their university that's on a different team, whether it's Azog
Just no matter
or
what,
Wallflower.
like
Yeah.
guaranteed if they make the finals.
I like the narrative of Niles versus Wallflower because those were the two that were promoted together on Golden Guardians.
Yeah,
had the LCS
exactly.
team together for a little bit, even though they're not in the same positions. Maybe I'm cheating a little bit as well. But Niles versus Tony Top as well is pretty cool, just because they were both in Academy at the same time. They were both former Golden Guardians Academy top laners. A lot of cool stuff. I think that matchup is going to be pretty exciting. I don't really know how that is going to turn out. But overall, kind of what are your expectations for this series? Like, I think that you already mentioned it a little bit, side lane aggression. Are we going to stick to that as kind of our headline?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you see Maryville play, right, they go for this this very aggressive style. Get back on something that can move around. Get Odd Orange on an early aggressive jungler. Like, this guy's playing Lee Sin in 2023. Like, who does that, right? So like get back in Odd Orange on champions that are able to impact the map, and then we either like boom top lane, or we boom bot lane, or hey, maybe we boom both. That's kind of the way it goes, and especially with how well Get Back has been playing.
Get Back is so
at
good.
this tournament, yeah, Get Back has really been looking amazing. That is very threatening, and I think Tony Top, they've got to find a way to prop up Iconic and allow Iconic to do what he wants to.
Wallflower.
Sorry, you're right, Wallflower.
I don't know who Iconic is. I know
Yeah. Who's that guy? Wallflower. They got to find a way to prop up Wallflower and not let him be a Wallflower in the corner this series. No, get your introverted friend in the midst of the game.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say, at least for me, who's only been watching the past couple of years of amateur / academy / things in general, this is probably the best League of Legends I've seen this Wallflower guy play. Whether it was with the previous moniker of Iconic or with this new name. I mean, just like running all over the map. I think this Sejuani has been really good for him. He had a crazy Wukong game against Team Fish Taco as well, that basically got him those wins. That, I think, is going to be a really interesting story. Him against Odd Orange, these two junglers kind of know what each other want to do. And also the mid lane, I think, is pretty interesting as well. Get Back versus Comp 9. I think Get Back maybe slightly favored just because he's just been playing amazing, but Comp 9 has done some pretty good stuff. Sorry, not Comp 9. What am I talking about? Sudsy has done some good stuff for his team as well. But let's talk about a premonition. Something random. Something that you just know in the back of your head is going to happen for this series. My premonition here for this series is that there will be a lot of all chat / client chat in this lobby. There's just going to be people typing nonstop back and forth, whether it's Wallflower, typing back to his current team, is Niles, spamming R to make sure that Champions League gets done. Hey, I've even seen Snow too throw a couple of things out there in the Qualifiers Discord. Not to leak anything here, but what do you think, Hawk?
Okay, Grapes. I've got a premonition. It's gonna be maybe a little bit less like banter focused, a little bit more gameplay focused, but I think it's definitely gonna happen. Somebody is going to flip the game, one of the games, on like a pre-level 3 invade or like a level 3 invade, like Fnatic did, right? Yeah. We're gonna see that. Somebody is gonna do something heinous in the jungle, and the game's gonna be over from minute 5 in one of them. Like it's gonna be done.
I hope for the caster's sake it is not game 5, because that's not a fun way to do things.
That'd be awful.
All right, got a lot of this discussion for how we think the series is gonna play out. But now, got to get into the meat and potatoes. What is your series prediction? Who's winning? How many games? Reminder, the only best of 5 will be the finals. Who's taking it all?
So, Grapes, I'm going 3-1 Maryville. I think that these two teams, both really good. I think Tony Top is great, but I don't see Tony Top having a individual advantage anywhere. Especially, we didn't really talk about bot lane, Grapes, but I think Maryville's bot lane is so incredibly good. I know you're a huge Zyko fan, and I think Scary Jerry's amazing as well. And Niles, Odd Orange, and Get Back should be more than capable of keeping up with Sudsy, Wallflower, and Tony Top. So maybe there's a game. I'll give Tony Top a game where like they get the right draft, they get the right game plan. Wallflower goes crazy, boom, like Maryville loses, or maybe Maryville's comp doesn't get off the ground. Who knows, right? But I see this as being a series where the ball would be in Maryville's court, and a lot of times they've managed to find wins in those situations.
I think overall, the Maryville TFT side of the bracket is more favored than the Douyin Tony Top Supernova
that
side
too.
Of the bracket. So overall, probably Maryville are the favorites. However, this is where Douyin Tony Top is going to come through, and they're going to beat Maryville 3-2. Wallflower is going to have the series of his life, and in OQ2, they're going to swap teams. Auto Orange going over to Tony Top, Wallflower going over to Maryville. Just
so
like
Auto Orange is the one that Game 5 flips the jungle. That's what you're saying. He Burger flips the matchup, and Wallflower takes over.
I think Wallflower, his plan has to be at least salvaging Levitate and Snow a little bit, because when they've been given resources, they've played well, but Scary Jerry and Zyko can dominate lane phases like nobody else's business, and they're known for pushing up a little bit at times. If Wallflower can come down there on a Sejuani or Wukong, that can maybe be where Tony Top come in there and maybe find an advantage. And maybe it's my Spice coming in there for this one matchup, but that's the first of 4. Let's see ahead.
Wait, just to add one more thing on that, onto what you said, iconic Wallflower. God, Wallflower might have to help out Levitate and Snow too. Just to add a little bit onto that as well. I'll be really impressed if Tony Top wins this series 3-2. I like the hope take. I'm super down with that. I'm down for the Wallflower hype. But the one thing is, it's super hard as a jungler if you're having to put out a fire in every lane, right? It's like, okay, we got to contain Get Back, like in mid lane. Can't let him roam. Okay, we got to make sure bot lane's able to salvage. Okay, we got to get Tony ahead. Oh, shoot, I got to get myself ahead. That can be really hard to play. But if Wildflower does it, that would be amazing. So I'm here for it.
Very well. That's the first of the 4. Let's go through the multiverse again. Find an alternate universe where the next matchup we're going to be talking about is TFT versus Supernova. This is going to be a pretty interesting one here. We got the transition going. Both of them are technically the lower seeds in this matchup, so if they win, both technically upsets, although I think it's pretty hotly contested throughout. My headline here, Hawk, the road to redemption. Both of these orgs, they wanted to be inducted into the NACL. They wanted to be one of those provisional teams. They both sent in their applications for sure, as they've been staples in the scene for a while, and neither of them got it. And now they're back here. They built really, really hype rosters to try to get into that league, and a win here in the finals would cement themselves as that favorite to enter the promotion relegation tournament.
Yeah, mine was really similar. Mine was a little dumber. Mine was the path back to P. They didn't make the proving ground, so they want to make the promotion.
Path to P, pushing P.
Path to P. That was mine. It's fucking stupid.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, that'll sell some tickets on a movie poster.
Yeah. Path to P right here. But it's true. It's similar to what you said, right? It's 2 established amateur orgs, very, very much teams that have been around for a while, right? And didn't have the year that they wanted to last year. I think especially TFT was a roster that was maybe built to compete a little bit more, and they didn't quite do as well as they were hoping. So
yeah, I think
they're looking great this year.
Yeah, both those teams last summer came out with rosters that people were pretty excited about, and neither of them even came close to matching them. And so now the rosters look much better in terms of comparison to the rest of the league, and there's a reason that they're both here in the semis. So making it to the finals would be a really nice redemption story for them both. But my key matchup here, I'm gonna go first on this one.
Yeah, go for it.
Is the jungle, not because I think it might be super close, but I think it's super funny to see that Dardoch has been playing in amateur since 2015, so this is his 9th year competing, and he's up against Kisno, who's
where's the graphic that I had for fan against Kisno?
Yeah, on Supernova, who's been on one other team other than Supernova, and that is CB Gaming. So if you look at the Leaguepedia pages, it's pretty different.
Yeah, hang on. I want to pull up this graphic if I can find it. Keep vamp for me for 30 more seconds.
Okay, maybe we can get to your key matchup after this. But we could talk a little bit how this series is going to go. Obviously, the jungle, pretty big skill disparity in terms of just experience and how they've been playing overall. Kisno had looked good on CB Gaming, but I think Dardoch is a very well-rounded player who has been a big reason behind the success for Team Fish Taco in some of their playoff victories. And yeah, I just think that is going to be a really interesting point to look at for them. Across the rest of the map, the mid lane is interesting as well. It's Comp9 versus Onat, 2 players that are pretty new to the scene. As we take a look at this graphic here, so picture this here, Hawk, but Dardoch's Leaguepedia is 3 times the length. If you go and look at it, it is so huge.
Yeah, it's imagine this, but way more ridiculous. It's gonna be such a David versus Goliath matchup, like you said.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to give your key matchup or just some expectations for this series as well.
Yeah, so my key matchup for this series is 1000% the bot lane. I think Azog and Chookies have looked amazing so far this tournament. I mean, I called way back earlier, I said that Chookies was a top 3 support, and I could still stand by that. But Azog, man, has looked awesome. And then one of the big narratives that we're talking about going into TFT versus Native was that Red has actually been the biggest carry for TFT. And I think it was a little bit more on Dardoch last time around in Comp 9 in that series. Red and Winter still so clearly are really important to how this team operates, because the game where Red and Winter were useless, they lost badly, right? Yeah. And then as soon as Red and Winter got some agency, yeah, we won't talk about the Alistar Winter. I know you watched the show. Don't know what happened there, but we all... Yeah, the Alistar incident was... It happens. Look, we've all been there. You still won. You're still here. So anyway, but once Red and Winter got agency, they looked amazing. The team looked so much different. And so I think that bot lane is really going to be where this series is won and lost for however many X Factor players these teams might have. That's what it felt like it came down to in Native against TFT, was who had pressure in bot lane. And I think that's what it's going to come down to again for the series against Supernova.
Yeah, I think Azog and Chookies have been really, really good. They were one of the main reasons they won that series against Ambition, and I think that this would be a really good opportunity for them to prove themselves against Red and Winter. And my premonition, I'm going to go back to jungle for a little bit because I think it's really funny. I think that overall Kisno has had the most success on just like heavy farming stuff, like the Udyr against Native is the thing that has stuck in my mind the most. I think that there's gonna be a game where Dardoch like picks Elise, and then Kisno's on like a farming jungler, and then Dardoch spends the entire first 5 minutes in the enemy jungle, just perma invading, not even taking any of his own camps, and just making Kisno's life miserable. Whether or not the game will be over in favor of Supernova or TFT kind of depends on the success of those invades, but that's my premonition. We're gonna see a lot of heavy invading out of Dardoch in this series.
Okay, all right. You're really going for the pro Dardoch take. I mean, Dardoch's amazing, right? But my premonition is, you know what? Kisno is gonna get a solo bolo on Dardoch, the rare jungle solo bolo. It's gonna happen. You think Dardoch's gonna live in his jungler? No, Kisno, he's gonna slam the Udyr B1 game 1, just run it through Dardoch's jungle. There is gonna be a big boar, not a bear, a boar, all over that jungle, and Dardoch, he's not even going to know what hit him because the young gun, Kisno, coming out strong.
There's a world where both of our premonitions are correct.
That's also true.
Dardoch can perma invade, and then Kisno's like, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to kill you. Solo.
Is Udyr like pick ban this series? Like, they're the two junglers.
They're the two Udyr players
that beat Native with Udyr.
I'm very excited to see. This would be a really fun matchup. I think just the jungle story is really fun to me.
It's awesome.
Let's close this one out. My prediction, albeit I'm pretty excited about how this might turn out. I have TFT 3-0. I think that Red and Winter are going to overcome Azog and Chookies, and the rest of the map looks pretty favored towards TFT. The one side you could give is Dragoon probably being able to beat the Alorum in lane, but I feel like Alorum doesn't need to win lane to have success for his team. I think Dardoch is going to outplay Kisno, and I think Onat is going to get outpaced by Comp 9, and I think that TFT is going to win.
Yeah, this one's really hard for me. My key matchup is definitely bottom lane. However, something that we didn't talk about is that Alorum Dragoon matchup, because Dragoon has sort of made a living on preying on the Alorums of the world, that the weak side top laners, Dragoon will pick his champs into them and beat them in an isolated matchup. But a lot of them are worse than Alorum, right? So, sort of hard to judge that. And I do think that is going to be a big thing to look out for. I'm going to give it TFT 3-2. The reason being is I think Supernova has the better bottom lane. I think Azog and Chookies have looked amazing. I think Azog and Chookies are going to really put a lot of pressure on Red and Winter and demand answers from Dardoch. The problem is I don't know if Dragoon will be able to get enough going over Alorum. And Kisno, as much as I'm super here for like the solo bolo storyline, I think he is going to need... I think Kisno is going to require his lanes to play well against Dardoch, right? It's easy to play jungle when your lanes are doing great. It's really hard to play jungle when your lanes need a lot of help. And so if he doesn't have to help them, I think Supernova could get a couple games, and that's why I think it's a 3-2. But I think at the end of the day, Team Fish Taco, as you sort of alluded to, they're too strong across the board for what might be a bit more of an imbalanced Supernova roster.
I like it. I like how we have different takes on all this as well. Sometimes
Yeah,
we're
I
like
do
very,
too.
very similarly aligned. We have had different opinions about both these series.
I'm actually, for me, I'm just gonna say, before we go into the next two, I think all these series, none of them are super like one-sided, and that's why I think there could be an argument to be made about all of them. Even though you're arguing that TFT against Supernova could be one-sided, which I think it could be.
I say it's 3-0, but I think it's a close 3-0. If you know
Right, like there's an angle I feel like for every team, and that's important. So.
Yeah, I think Supernova probably will get stronger as well as some of the pieces get to build together a little bit more. Kismet and Onat are such a new pairing of mid-jungle, both in terms of playing together and also just experience as a whole. And I think another tournament's going to help them out with that. So maybe favorite TFT now. We'll see after this. But we can move on a little bit into the next potential situation. We're going to stick with TFT this time against Douyin Tony top in a matchup where there's a lot of T's in the names. That's what I got out of this. What's your headline here?
Oh no, what's my headline for this one? It is fucking give me your headline first.
Well, my headline here is, and this might help you out a little bit, is this time it's personal because these two teams played in the second round of the GSL in the same group, and Douyin Tony top beat Team Fish Taco 2-1. Now, important to note, TFT was playing with Crimson in the mid lane instead of Comp 9 for the majority of that series, and there were ping issues throughout for TFT, and I think they're going to be a little bit mad about that, and they're going to want to come out swinging with a victory if they can possibly get it here in the finals.
Yeah, that's a pretty obvious one. I was trying to think of something more creative, but I think it is just Revenge of the Taco.
Just the rematch.
It's the rematch. Revenge of the Taco. Because like you said, I mean that was a pretty surprising one. Because I mean, remember up until that point in the tournament, Douyin Tony top hadn't looked that amazing.
Mm-hmm. They went 3-2.
Yeah, they went 3-2, and even though they 2-0'd, was it ISU? It
Mirage.
You're right. It was not the most dominant 2-0 from what I remember. And so we weren't sold. We weren't sold on Douyin Tony top. And so watching TFT fall, that was really surprising. And I think at the end of the day, the storyline is, can Team Fish Taco overcome that?
Yep. My key matchup. Let's take a look here. Out of these players, I'm going to pick that mid lane here between Comp 9 and Sudsy. These are two mid laners that were pretty good back in the day, back in like 2021, which is ancient times here in semi-pro League of Legends, but didn't really play that much in 2022, and now are back on top teams in 2023, and they have had their own impressive moments here and there, and they didn't get to really play against each other much in that first time that they did match up in that GSL group stage just because of some of the ping issues that were happening. So I'm excited to see them play this time around, and I actually don't really know who's going to come out on top.
Wow, I'm really surprised. I feel like this one has to be jungle matchup. Wallflower against Dardoch.
That's the other one.
Are you kidding me? Like, these are the players with LCS experience, or two of the players with LCS experience. By far the most experienced junglers in this tournament, at least for the most part. And I mean, this is just, I think, going to be where the matchup is really won and lost, because I think both these teams are actually very even in a lot of their lanes, maybe slight edge to TFT in the bottom lane. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be how much can jungle tip the scales in one team's favor or another. And we've talked a lot about in the first half how Wallflower has been the X factor for Tony top so far. Well, Dardoch was an X factor just this past Sunday. So I mean, if anyone can shut out that X factor, it's a player like him.
That's probably the more obvious answer. I will give you that. Overall,
I'm boring. What can I say?
No. It's a good answer. And Dardoch and Iconic played against each other in LCS in 2021 as well, from Dignitas and Golden Guardians.
Yep.
That's a pretty cool storyline. Overall expectations. I think jungle, as you mentioned, going to be a very, very important matchup. The rest of the lanes, kind of maybe some disparities here and there in those solo lanes. What do you think, Hawk?
Yeah, I definitely think there could be. Like I said, I think there's a little bit of a disparity in the bottom lane, and then also just in terms of like these players' toolkits in the solo lanes, like you just said, is Comp 9 has been a player that he's been willing to play some different stuff, Grapes, whereas Sudsy has been really solid on a lot more like consistent picks, and there's nothing wrong with that. But
Azir is good.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it ain't broke, right? Like you don't need to change anything. And so that's gonna be really interesting to see like what sort of things are pulled out in mid lane. And then also, Alorum, we talk about all the time. He's got his champs. Alorum is never gonna demand jungle attention. He's just gonna like be big meatball and win the game, or maybe AP Gragas and win the game, right? But Tony Top, a player that can play a bit more of a carry style if necessary.
Yeah, I think that might be a really interesting one to look at because, Dragoon versus Alorum, maybe not as much experience there for Dragoon, but still a very, very good top laner to try and match up against Alorum. But Tony Top has been around for a while, has had some like pretty good performances here in the NACLQ, I will say. So maybe this is the piece, that person with academy experience that could potentially break Alorum here for the first time throughout TFT's kind of play throughout this event. My premonition for this series is there will be a 50-minute clown fiesta where we are just dying to get out of this game because that game 3 between Tony Top and TFT that last time went way too long as well, and I think that we probably will see something like that again because these teams like to play a little bit slower, I think, overall.
Fair enough. I could totally see that happening. My premonition is that at some point in the series, we're going to have like a tank fight that we just watch for like 2 minutes straight unbroken, like in the side lane. Like we'll get the Scion against like Sejuani just like beating each other's ass with grass procs and like no one taking any damage. And we'll just like play like the Benny Hill music. You know what I mean? Like we're going to get that.
I like that. A lot of Cassante out of Tony Top recently.
Yeah,
it got nerfed, but still an option.
Not for this tournament.
Still 13.1B.
So Cassante still bueno.
Cassante's still good. My prediction here. Actually, Hawk, do you want to go first with this prediction?
Yeah, I'm also taking TFT 3-2 in this one. I think what it really comes down to is I think TFT's bot lane is just a little bit better. I think Alorum and Tony Top are gonna slap on each other all game. I think Comp9 and Sudsy. Honestly, that one could be explosive, but I think I rate them similarly. Comp9, by the way, like has been really impressive. I just want to say that. I feel like
that Vel'Koz, he has some really great RE games as well.
Vel'Koz was crazy, yeah. Like Comp9's been great, and I think I rate them and Sudsy very similarly. And so while I think jungle is where the series will be won and lost, I think Team Fish Taco should have a decently consistent advantage in bot, and that will make that'll push them over the edge. 3-2.
Tony Top will lose 3-1. TFT will take it. I think the bot lane.
I was like, this guy's just a contrarian. No way, man.
The bot lane is a little too much of a diff for me, in my opinion, at least so far.
Yeah.
Levitating Snow has had some flashes. Still, I think that they have been making some mistakes at times, despite some of the attention that Wallflower has been giving.
Red and Winter have just been too good, especially like when Winter's not playing Alistar.
Yeah, last thing before I move on to our last matchup is I really didn't like the drafts coming out from Tony Top when they played from TFT when they played against Tony Top. Mm-hmm. Their mid bot was basically arrows, lethality Varus and Aurelia for their only damage alongside like just a bunch of tanks, and that did nothing when it came to like 30 minutes later into the game. And so I think that they need to take a look at that. And I think having Comp9 actually helps that because Crimson won't be on like Aurelia/Yeon.
They also played a game of Varus Nami because they got the Lucian stolen from them, and that is always not ideal.
All right. Last series, unless you have anything else to say.
No, I'm good.
I saved this one for last for a special reason because it is El Clasico, Maryville Supernova. We're going to preview this finals matchup. They have been at each other's throats for years on end, even before we started casting League of Legends Hawk, and seeing them in the finals would be such a story. What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Same for me. Right. We talked about the first matchup was like the infrastructure matchup. What did you call it? Where like Maryville super established, Tony Top 5 friends. This is like the most established collegiate team against like the most established amateur team. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Supernova is synonymous with NA Amateur, and Maryville is synonymous with CLOL, and to see them throw down is always a treat.
That was the tagline that they put in at the end of 2021. It was Maryville versus Supernova for the last spot at Proving Ground Summer 2021. Although the rosters were a little bit different, the point still implies.
The blood remains, Grapes.
Yeah, and it was the Kings of Collegiate versus the Heart of Amateur, and it was so
Yep.
exciting. Supernova barely won out, and I'm really excited for this series.
You know when I remember something from 2021 that it's notable. So
Yeah, that was a big moment. And they've matched up against each other in the past. Supernova had a bit of a quieter 2022. Now finally back up and running again, and it's gonna be a pretty exciting matchup. My matchup to watch, I think this is a pretty easy one. For me at least, is the bot lane. Scary Jerry Zyko versus Azog Chookies. This is where I think things are going to go pretty crazy. Azog and Scary Jerry, of course, have both been at Maryville for the last year or so. And Azog was a starter on Maryville rosters for the past couple of splits, and this is the first time around that Scary Jerry's taking that spot instead for the NACLQ. And also, Azog and Chookies played together for a few years at Columbia as well. So it's like kind of these two bot lane pairs going to go at it. One is more experienced and played together for longer with Azog and Chookies, and one is a little bit newer with some fresh faces, Scary Jerry and Zyko, but they're still some of the top bot lanes that we have left in this tournament, and I'm really excited to see them play.
Yeah, that's the obvious one, and I'm going to agree with everything you said. So just to talk about a different matchup, I'm going to talk about top lane, because Niles against Dragoon, that is also super hype. This was coming into the tournament, the top laners that I rated the highest, alongside Alorum, and then we didn't know about Tony Top yet. But, I had them very highly. Remember, I was upset about Dragoon ban, got roasted for B1 Niles. Well, you know what? B1 Niles has looked pretty damn good, so fuck all of you. But anyway, in all seriousness, no. I think this is a big-time matchup because these are two carry top laners as well. They are not afraid of demanding resources and playing the game through their lanes. We've got champions like Dragoon's Darius that you always have to watch out for. Niles, accustomed to things like the Camille. Well, Darius beats Camille, there's some interesting things to watch out for there. So I definitely agree with you. I think the bot lane narratively and also gameplay wise is going to be the most interesting place to look out for, but we should have our eyes on top as well, because Niles against Dragoon, experienced top laners that have been scrapping for a while.
Yeah, and for general gameplay thoughts, I'm really interested to see how these junglers interact with each other.
Yes.
Odd Orange has a lot of areas to potentially look at here in this matchup. Loves to go towards top lane, but do you want to try and, kill Dragoon in a 2v1 that has proven to be hard sometimes, especially if he's on Darius and Alawi. So we'll see if that's a potential option. I think mid lane is probably the biggest disparity between Getback and Onat, because I think Getback has been playing amazing this entire tournament, and Onat has been fine, but still, again, relatively inexperienced. And so maybe Odd Orange might want to shift his attention over there, try to get back ahead like he has for the past couple of series, especially that one that they had against Lit. And that's where I can maybe see this series being broken open a little bit for Maryville.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to look out for this series is going to be watch how these teams cross map, right? Because sort of like you were saying, where do the junglers go, and are they going to try to match each other, or is it like going to be one game Maryville perma diving bot, Supernova perma diving top, Tenno Dragoon against Tenno Scary Jerry? Like, that's the kind of thing that I think is going to be really impactful in this series. So seeing how that pathing goes, where supports go to facilitate, where mid laners go to facilitate, and whether or not they handshake and try to contest each other, or whether or not they cross map, is going to be the big question that I think needs to be answered in this series.
Premonition for Maryville versus Supernova. It's going to go to your point a little bit, Hawk. I think at the top, I think that Niles and Dragoon are going to solo kill each other like 6 times.
Don't take it! No! That was going to be fun! Mine was going to be, there's going to be a solo kill every game in top lane.
Yeah.
Every game.
Maybe both. Maybe for both players.
Maybe for both.
I'm down to split this one with you. Like,
yes,
that's
because this is it. Yeah.
That's going to happen.
There's a solo kill every game. It's too explosive. These teams, it's like I said, talking about the featured matchup, like Dragoon and Niles, not strangers to playing carries, and they are going to, I think, throw down the gauntlet against each other. I do not expect them to handshake matchups. And I think these games are going to be pretty flippy, like across the board. So top lane, why not?
All right, Hawk. It's the heart of amateur versus the Kings of Collegiate. What's your prediction here?
Supernova has my heart, Grapes. They have all of our hearts. But Maryville's going to rip it out of them 3-0.
3-0. Is that one-sided, you think?
I think the only way Supernova wins a game is if they get like a Dragoon smash.
Okay. Yeah, very valid. I think just for the narratives, this has to go 5 games, and I will favor Maryville because I think that they probably are top to bottom a little bit better overall. But Maryville 3-2 is my prediction for this series. Some of the predictions they get a little wonky sometimes. So I like how we were able to have some different opinions here and there. But overall,
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty fun. Hopefully,
Just
we will
wait,
get
to elaborate. I want to
post-quality.
just to elaborate on mine a little bit more, just so it's not like, oh, Supernova sucks, right? I'll give actual analysis, and then because I don't think Supernova is bad at all. I think bot and top are pretty even. We've sort of talked about that. The big thing that we've not really talked about, mid jungle. I just think that Maryville's mid jungle is going to be a lot better. And when you're a team that wants to play through side lanes, losing mid jungle it's like so unwinnable unless like someone's smurfing it. So that's like the actual analysis there. But I think there's a world again like where a Dragoon smash happens, or maybe we get Maryville fumbles the bag one game. So
Yeah.
just to not shit on Supernova too hard. I think they're great. It's just I think stylistically it's a mismatch.
There's no reason that my logic should be any different when comparing, Kisno and Onat against Maryville's mid jungle versus TFT's mid jungle, but you gotta do it.
I mean, stylistically, there's a
memes here and
difference
there.
though. Like I see where you're coming from. So
Yeah, you gotta do it for the memes. You gotta do it for the hopium that this matchup happens and that is a banger.
yeah. Hey, I would love if there was 5 games in this series in the El Clasico.
All right, well, I think that's about it. We have explored all of the potential possibilities, all the different universes. Hey, there's an infinite amount of them out of there. So there's gonna be all these matchups happening in some capacity. So we just previewed them all for you. But pretty solid episode, Hawk. There's a lot to talk about, and the NACLQ, I think, is definitely one of them. Those points are going to be so important for those qualifications to get into promo relegation.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, winning here, getting finals pretty much solidifies you into one of those top 4 spots as long as you don't completely fumble the bag at the next tournament, right? So, this would be a great way to start your year. And, we talked a lot about the finals previews, right? But these semifinal matches as well, you're not going to want to miss those, especially TFT against Maryville. We were talking about that side of the bracket feels pretty damn strong, Grapes. I'm excited to watch that. But Supernova against Tony Top as well. It's going to be some great games.
Very, very excited. And that's going to do it for this episode of Salty Runback. Went a little bit long on that last part, but it's fun to just make sure that we get into the nitty-gritty of everything here. And make sure to check out the NACL as well this week. We got 3 days of games once more, and only a few more series before those playoff seeds are determined.
It's getting exciting. It is heating up. But remember, this is only the first qualifier tournament out of 2 for the split. So we got another one coming up in a few weeks, which means there's going to be even more qualifiers action. NACL as well, 2 weeks left before the playoffs. And we know once those playoffs start, that double elimination bracket is going to be spicy. So, we're at a simmer right now. The pot is about to start boiling. Grapes, I know we got some content in the works that we're not going to announce yet, but, especially between tournaments, maybe push some things out there aside from the podcast that we're pretty excited about. We've been cooking in the kitchen. Watch the semifinals on our channel as well as over on the Challengers League stream. Watch the finals on Challengers League. Follow it over to Rally Cry once it cuts away after 3 games, which is unfortunate, but, it is what it is. And yeah, Grapes, I think this was a great episode. As always, I love getting to talk a lot about these NACLQ teams. There's so many great players. And if you disagree with what we said, if you think a 5th team is going to make the finals from the top rope, maybe you can take what we said with a grain of salt. Follow all of our socials at Salty Runback Pod. We are saltyrunbackpod@gmail.com. If you want to send us a message, we drop our episodes every Wednesday night on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and Twitch, so you're not gonna want to miss that. I've been Grapes, that's been Hawk. Have a great night, everyone.
What?